You may think that you know what's most important in trying to prove your asylum case, but you probably don't. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the 3 keys to winning asylum. Now, these are the 3 things that the asylum officer or judge are going to spend a majority of their time probing. You need to speak to each of these 3 things in your asylum application materials and to be ready to discuss them at length in your asylum interview or court hearing, as this is where most of the time on that crucial day will be spent. I'm Brian Manning, and I used to be an asylum officer with the government, but now, as an asylum lawyer, well, I help immigrants all over the country to secure their future in America through asylum. Let me know in the comments if you've got an asylum case pending or you're considering applying possibly, and I'd especially like to hear from you if you've been waiting for multiple years for an asylum interview. All right, I used to be an asylum officer with the government, and I cannot tell you how frustrating it was to review application materials from applicants who did a poor job articulating their case. In answering the substantive questions on the asylum application form and in writing their so-called personal statement or declaration that many people submit to explain their case in just a few pages, well, most people just rambled on about things that did not matter and didn't give me the details that I needed for the most crucial aspects of their case. And this happened during interviews too, when I would ask questions for the purpose of gathering the information that I needed to assess whether a person met all the requirements for asylum. Well, they would tell me what they thought was important and often wouldn't even answer the question that I was actually asking. This was annoying. And the truth is, it makes it less likely that you'll win asylum if you do this. You see, you want to make the asylum officer or judge's life as easy as possible. You want to help them get to the answer yes in your case in the easiest way possible. And you do this by giving them only the information they need and doing so in a concise, easy to understand way. Both in your written materials and your testimony, you need to be ready to give the decision maker the information they need to analyze your case in light of the asylum rules. Okay, so what are the most important parts of an asylum case? What does the judge really want to know about your asylum case? Well, there are 3 things that are far and away the most important. You'll probably spend about 90% of the time at your asylum interview or court hearing talking about these 3 things, all right? Number 1, past persecution. What does that mean? The judge will try to assess whether the harm that you've already endured in your country is so bad that it meets the standard under US asylum law to be considered persecution. But that, of course, begs the question, what is persecution? Well, it basically means really serious harm, like grave harm. So for example, getting slapped in the face 2 or 3 times and being called some insulting names would not be considered sufficiently severe to rise to the level of persecution. Now, on the other hand, being beaten all over your body with a baseball bat, including blows to the head that caused you to bleed and required medical attention, well, yeah, that would probably be enough to constitute persecution. Now, if you add to that some form of torture, like pulling out someone's fingernails or waterboarding them, then you definitely pass that persecution threshold. Note that multiple incidents of harm can, when considered cumulatively, constitute persecution, even where the incidents would not on their own be bad enough to count as persecution. So remember the example I gave of being slapped in the face? Well, just one such incident would not count as persecution, but if that happened like 5 times and maybe the person was also constantly harassed, like maybe the authorities followed them around and constantly called them on the telephone to harass them and maybe even got them fired from their job, well, then all of this stuff combined, yeah, it might be enough to make the judge or asylum officer determine that yes, past persecution has occurred. Now, this designation that you have in fact been persecuted already, well, it puts you in a much better position due to how the law works to win your case as compared to a case where there's no past persecution established and you have to rely just on harm that might happen in the future. Note that in rare cases, you can establish past persecution without any physical harm having happened at all. Severe psychological harm can get you over the persecution hump where the bad guys inflicted on you intentionally. For example, if they put a gun in someone's mouth and perform a mock execution, this causes extreme psychological harm, well, yes, this could be considered harm sufficiently severe to count as persecution. Now, here's the key to establishing past persecution. You've got to talk about concrete examples and give lots of details about incidents or threats of harm so that the officer understands just how bad it really was, and so that they moreover understand what motivated the harm. They need to know that the persecution is motivated by the fact that you possess one of the 5 protected characteristics under US asylum law. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll get to that in just a minute. I'm going to leave a link in the description to a video where I talk in much more detail about how to describe past incidents of harm. Check that out if you really want to go deep on that topic. Okay, we've covered past persecution. Now, number 2 on our list, the second thing that the officer or judge really wants to know about is how likely you are to be severely harmed in the future. Now, in most asylum cases, irrespective of what's happened in the past, you need to show that you're at real risk of being persecuted in the future. You have to show that you have a so-called well-founded fear of persecution, a reasonable fear of being harmed in a way that's very serious if you go back to your country. Now, there are 2 ways that you can do this. You can either demonstrate that someone actually has the will to harm you if you were to return to your country, like you're on someone's list and they're thinking, man, I can't wait until this person comes home, we're going to get them. Or alternatively, you can show that you're at real risk just because of who you are, even if no one is planning to harm you. Now, for this second route, where you can demonstrate a well-founded fear of persecution, even though no one is actively planning to harm you, well, this is done by showing that there exists in your country what is called a pattern or practice of persecution of people who possess a protected characteristic that you also possess. Now, the idea here is that just fitting the profile of someone who has this characteristic is enough to put you at risk, as people with this characteristic are widely targeted for harm in your country. And you would do this, show that there's a pattern or practice of persecution of similarly situated people by providing reports from governments, nonprofit organizations, or news outlets about persecution in your country. But let's go back to that other route, the more common scenario where someone has had problems and they do have reason to believe that someone wants to harm them gravely. Well, how do you prove that the bad guys do in fact have this inclination to persecute you? Well, you're going to point out in your written asylum materials and in your testimony any past harm against you, along with any threats that show that they intend to harm you in the future. And now, in addition to threats, there may be other circumstances that you can highlight that help you make the point that yes, indeed, these bad guys are likely to harm me if I go back to my country. Okay, we're ready for number 3, the third main thing that the judge cares about. Now, this is called nexus. There has to be a nexus between the persecution in your case and the fact that you possess at least one of the 5 protected characteristics under US asylum law. Well, you don't actually have to possess one of them. It's enough that the bad guys think that you possess one of them if that's the reason they want to harm you. The best way to think of this is that you've got to convince the decision maker that the persecution is motivated, at least in significant part, by one of the 5 protected grounds. So what are these protected grounds? Well, they're your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, and something called membership in a particular social group. You've got to point to words that the bad guys have used or any other circumstances that indicate what it is that's behind the persecution, what's causing them to want to harm you. You have to show that it's one of those 5 things we just listed. Because you see, persecution that is not motivated by one of the 5 protected grounds will not lead to asylum. All right, in summary, the 3 main aspects of any asylum case are past persecution, future persecution, and nexus, or whether the persecution is motivated by one of the 5 protected asylum grounds. All right, if you're ready to take the next step and get help with your asylum case, then call my office today. That number is 713-909-0401. Remember, we help people all over the country, so it doesn't matter where you live. Call us now to schedule an asylum strategy session so that we can help you secure your future in America through asylum. Again, I'm Brian Manning, and it's an honor to serve you in your asylum journey.